What does Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has to offer as a game in general and in terms of performance in its opening week? After having spent just over 35 hours with the game so far, I've had a very fun experience which I will break down for you to see if this title is something for you and if you might have fun playing it as well. The game has a lot going for it, from its extensive story and its presentation, the way immersion has been an integral part of its design, and it offers a genuine yet rewarding challenge when it comes to combat without being overly frustrating. Quick point of attention is that I've played this on PC, so I can comment on how the game plays and runs on Xbox or PlayStation. Now I'm running an Nvidia 4090 with all the settings to the max to get quality footage for you to watch, but other than PC I can't say anything about console performance. I will follow up with another review a few weeks in to see how the experience is after I've put more time into it, along with any patches that might come out. So if you want to see that as well, and any tips and tricks videos that I always like to make, subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like for support. I always strive to not include any spoilers when you're listening to this video, but there might be a few visual spoilers from the opening sequences as B-roll. There will also be chapters for you to skip parts you might want to discover for yourself. And with that being said, let's get into it. In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, a story-driven open-world RPG, you play as Henry, who's trying to make his way through 15th century medieval Bohemia after having been to hell and back after what happened to him in part 1. But you won't miss out if you haven't played it, because the game starts off with a beefy recap which will keep you occupied for at least the first hour. Now this immediately proves that you're dealing with a story-driven RPG, because there will be lots of cutscenes in the game, all done with motion capture, so they're pleasant to look at with good writing to back it up, so it doesn't feel as a hindrance because it's something to really enjoy. Now in fact, the story element is one of the central pillars of the game, and this will be a first indicator whether or not this game is for you. Now of course you can skip all the dialogue and cutscenes, but you'd be missing out on a big part of the DNA of this franchise. One thing that's noticeable straight away is that the visuals are excellent, especially if you have a high-end system, but also on a 30 series Nvidia or AMD 6000 series GPU, you will get a very good looking 1080p experience. And whether you explore the open countryside or a dense forest, the landscape offers a lot of what I'd like to call these Kodak moments. You can tell a lot of work has gone into setting the right stage to deliver you an open world that accurately portrays what Bohemia, what is now the Czech Republic, would have looked like. Now this is carried on in infrastructure, housing, decoration indoors, how NPCs are dressed, and of course how you yourself can collect a plethora of different clothing styles and armor. Now overall, I'd say the game is very accessible when it comes to requirements, but also in its performance, because I haven't noticed any major game-breaking bugs. There was no day one patch needed, and the vast majority of players was able to just go at it playing the game instead of finding bugs. And I can nitpick of course about some of the smaller glitches I noticed in all my time playing so far, but I've only seen hair of character models acting weird maybe twice, so it doesn't warrant as a valid argument to say you should be aware of certain bugs as far as presentation goes. One thing I was particularly happy with, given that the game has a day-night cycle, is the speed at which this cycles and how evident that is when you're looking at shadows. Sometimes you'll have games where this can be rather odd looking due to shadows almost jumping or stuttering, but here it just looks really smooth. Now I might be going too much into detail here, but for me personally it just contributes to the visual presentation and immersion as a whole. And you know, a game has hit the bullseye when it comes to immersion if you can fully focus on playing the game instead of making mental lists of all of the things that don't add up or strike you as odd. Which brings me to another major pillar in the game's design, and that's the level of immersion. You can tell this was a top of the list criteria during design, which shows in a lot of the smaller actions in game, such as gathering herbs, opening and closing doors, and all of the professions you can practice in-game, such as blacksmithing and alchemy. Now, in a lot of games, you'll see these actions being performed almost instantaneously, but by visualizing them, they become almost tangible and it feels a lot more realistic, keeping you immersed. Another excellent and perhaps even the best example of this would have to be combat. Now, I have no sword fighting experience other than the imaginary sword fights I have with my son, but I'd say that the worst thing Warhorse could have done is if they had toned this system down to a level where it would be more arcadey in order to let the game be accessible to a broader audience. Instead, you'll feel like combat isn't to be treated lightly, especially in the beginning, and for me that reflects the idea that during medieval times, picking a fight could have you ending up dead in less than a minute, but it's all been designed in such a way that it makes combat feel challenging yet rewarding at the same time. And this is something that was mentioned by the devs in the announcement trailer, and I think I'm slightly paraphrasing here, but the combat is historically accurate, not for the sake of being accurate, but to create this deep sense of immersion, which means that with such a level of immersion, certain gameplay elements and design choices will certainly not make this a game for everyone. Now, you won't find a UI filled with quest progression meters, nor does it compromise its goal to be the best medieval RPG experience for gamers. Quests might feel like a bit old school, where you can spend 5 minutes looking around where you're supposed to go or find the one you're supposed to be talking to. And it all fits the narrative, but if you're looking for a game that has a faster pace in terms of picking up and completing tasks, then this might not fit you too well. Also, the save system is something to get used to. Veterans know it, but if you haven't played this before, where some games have the tendency to autosave every 5 minutes, there is none to be found here. The only times the game is saved is when you sleep on a bed, reach a certain quest milestone, or you perform a manual save making use of a consumable, meaning that when you spend the last 45 minutes exploring a forest, countering some bandits, and then die in combat, and if you didn't or couldn't save manually because you ran out of potions, you will have just lost 45 minutes of progression. And some people might feel this is annoying or unfair, but from an immersion standpoint, it makes sense. And this was no time in history to be messing about with every other person you encountered, and actions will have consequences. Which brings me to the crime and punishment system. And of course you can steal your way through town, but NPCs are pretty darn good at deducing it was you who robbed them blind. So if you leave open a door after you've been inside, which otherwise is always closed, the NPC will notice and they'll start looking around. Now, when you get caught, you have a few options based on skill checks to try and get out of the situation, but it's also very well possible that you'll find yourself at the pillory and afterwards with a severely bruised ego and damaged reputation. And this all affects how you're being treated, so this again shows how immersive the game can be. Of course, one of the great features of open world games is that feeling you get after you've passed through the introduction and you're let go to do whatever you want. That moment you can really sit down and have a look at what's what, but also to find out what activities you can undertake. Now, physical boundaries are almost nowhere to be found, and you can enter most buildings and cut through forests on horse outside the regular paths. You'll find the occasional bandit on the road, but don't expect random enemies or patrols to spawn in all over the place. That's something this game simply doesn't do. Most encounters will come from quests and the static POIs present on the map. And at some point you'll find yourself ending up in a sword fight, which brings me to the third major pillar of the game. The combat in this game can be really challenging, but it's very well explained in the various tutorials you'll see in the beginning, and there are numerous occasions where you can practice with certain NPCs along your journey. The system is designed in such a way that it allows for a historically accurate portrayal of how combat would look like, using different weapons and utilizing different techniques, while at the other hand, it gives players a real sense of accomplishment with each defeated enemy. And in the beginning, it'll take some getting used to, and you'll be easily defeated even during friendly practice matches. But the more time you spend fighting, the better you get at it, which is represented by the skill system. I'm aware that I'm generalizing a bit here, but it's a pretty standard system where your day-to-day actions will increase your skill level. For instance, speaking to an NPC will increase your speech level. Skills upgrade automatically, so you don't get a skill point to spend. Instead, every once in a while you get a perk point at certain intervals, and this is how you get to roleplay. Because perks allow you to let Henry be more of a spokesperson instead of a sword fighter, or more focused on crafting items instead of being a thief. And for combat, this means that at first you'll have low stamina, meaning you will be tired after a few attacks and blocks, meaning you need to catch your breath for a moment, which translates well to how combat would actually go in the medieval times. It wouldn't be an endless flurry of blows and kicks and whatever, and I think it presents an authentic yet very playable combat system. Now, I wouldn't call the skill system extremely innovative, but it doesn't need to be since it works in terms of immersion, allowing you to simply get better at what it is that you do the most or want to do the most. And then there are a couple of mini games present I want to mention that will be viewed upon more negatively than pleasantly by some. Especially lockpicking can prove to be quite the challenge, and KCD2 does not have a setting that allows for automatic salvation like in Star Wars Outlaws, where you could disable the lockpicking and hacking minigames if you didn't feel like going through the motions. Now, I can see a lot of people try this, get frustrated, and never ever touch it again, which seems to be a waste, because that essentially means an entire approach to playing the game is ignored. So I'm curious to see if this is a sentiment shared somehow by Warhorse, and if this will receive some tweaking. There's a ton to explore and do in this game, but you have to be aware of what the game's goal is according to Warhorse, because it definitely shows in everything it's trying to do. When you're looking for an RPG that has that touch of old school, meaning getting your ass handed to you by the game on occasion, and the sweet taste of victory after your 10th attempt at the same combat encounter, while at the same time offering you so many approaches to the game to explore and master, then this title offers plenty. However, when you enjoy games that have a higher pace, where missions and practicing professions don't cost that much time, maybe less drawn out narratives, then this won't likely be the best fit for you. But it would be like buying a Lamborghini because you say you like driving a car but don't care too much about aesthetics. That would be part of the reason why you're buying a car like that, and the same should be held true for this kind of game. Now, it's also in an amazing state at launch, which is a testament to the amount of work the Warhorse team has put into its development. And with a production budget of around $41 million US, this game is already a big success, both creatively and financially, because 1 million copies have already been sold, I think 2-3 days in after launch. Like I said, I've only seen a couple of graphical glitches, and on top of that about 5 crashes to desktop spread out over my entire time with the game. But other than that, it's been a very fluent experience. And with that being said, thank you for watching, and of course, thank you to PlayOnBunnyLocks for sending me a review code so I could spend time with the game and let you guys know what to expect if you're thinking about getting this title. Again, thank you for watching, leave a like and a sub to see more KCD2 content and other gaming content. I appreciate the support, and I'd love to see you here in the next video on the channel. Take care guys, and see you later.